I thank you, Michael, for what I hope was an accurate introduction, but mostly I thank you for replacing the water with good Bavarian beer. Okay. So I am not an expert in Hägar, but I am an expert in Gary Hallgren, I think. And I certainly have seen and followed Hägar as a fan, but I'm not an insider. So we have a chance tonight to talk to a true insider who draws this every single day. Now, the name Hallgren is Swedish, I believe. So is it true you got this job because of your Viking blood?
No, I actually got the job on my way to Nova Scotia. But I turned right in Connecticut and ran into Hägar.
Well, let's start at the beginning. So everyone who is a fan of Hägar knows Dik Browne created this strip in, what, 1974?
I think so, yeah.
73.
Wow.
Thank you. And after he died, his family took over. And most recently, one of the sons, Chris Browne, died, as you may know. And so you've become more involved than ever. Explain to us, what is the process? Who does what to make this strip come alive every day?
I can tell you what I do. I don't know exactly what Dick did or Chris did or anyone else did until I sort of fell into the job a little at a time. But to go back a ways, I have been a fan of Hägar's since 1973. When it first came on, I said, this is a good, funny comic strip. This is one of the best comic strips. And by the way, thank you, Bavaria, for loving Hägar, because otherwise I would not be here. I'm having such a good time. So anyway, back to the process. Hägar today is made by a small team. It's Chance Browne and Chance Browne's wife, who manages the daily, the scheduling, any kind of editorial direction that I need to know about. She passes it on to me. And Bob Weber Jr. is the writer, and he's been solely responsible for writing the gags since 2015, and he's the one that got me the job because he hired me first to do layouts for the gags he was writing for the Browns. I said, you really don't need me to do that. These are good scripts. And he says, I'm a little nervous. I want everybody to understand if the gag works or if it does not work. Very professional. So I did layouts for Bob, and I've been working with Bob since 1985, so we go back quite a ways. And if you don't know who Bob Weber Jr. is, he's the son of Bob Weber Sr., who did an American comic strip called Moose and Molly forever. And when Bob Weber Sr. died a few years ago, he was still doing the comic strip. It was maybe not as popular as it used to be, but he was. Bob Jr. he grew up in a comics family, so he understands comics thoroughly. When I said I turned right in Connecticut, it was because of Bob Weber, who lives in Connecticut. And perhaps you know or you don't know, but Connecticut was always called the cartoonist ghetto, because it was 1 hour by train to New York City, where all the magazines were. So Bob Weber Jr. was in Connecticut and worked for King Feature Syndicate when I met him. He sold a little comic strip called Slylock Fox, Comics for Kids, and I drew part of it for years and years and years. So when he got this job writing Hägar, he asked me to help. And then Dick Hodgins, the inker, became ill. He lost his sight. And unfortunately also passed on soon after that. And I became the inker. Chris Browne was the penciler. And then Chris got sick. and he had to stop. And I became the penciler and the inker. So I just kept on going. But I had the experience because I had been doing comics since 1968 for newspapers, underground newspapers, which brought me to underground comics, which brought me to any kind of comics. I drew comics all the time on the side while I made money as an illustrator. I worked for many, many magazines, newspapers, even worldwide. And it made a good living. But I never gave up comics. And when Hägar came along, you couldn't believe how happy I was. No matter how sad the circumstances that made it possible for me to start drawing Hägar, I'm still happy. Back to you, Dennis.
Well, speaking of your underground roots, apparently the German publisher has let the Hägar collection go out of print and did not reprint it in time for this festival. So you, in fact, are drawing at the U-Comics booth. So you've come full circle. Let's get back to the characters in Hägar. You've drawn them now hundreds and hundreds of times. Is there one character that you find a little more difficult to draw, or not?
And, the most difficult character to draw is Honey.
Why?
Pretty girls are difficult to draw. You know.
The proportions must be just right.
Yeah, and you can. A little variation makes a lot of difference, and. I drew a few honeys today, and there was one I did. It was acceptable, but I was very disappointed in myself because Honey she's got to be really cute. I don't know how she got that way because her mom's not cute, her dad's not cute.
Maybe there
she
was
has to be.
Pillaging in the village by attractive Vikings.
Hey, yeah, the next village over, they came and raided, and yeah, that's the way things used to be.
Yeah.
That's a joke we can't do, though, for newspapers.
No, and for good reason. So let's talk about the daily grind of filling these 3 or 4 panels every day. What kind of a work schedule do you have?
I have coffee in the morning. I check the email because that's how the scripts come in. And when the scripts come in, I wait for Deborah Browne to sequence them so that I know which strip is which release date and in what order. Because if I don't do that and I just draw what Bob Weber sends me, then I have to shuffle them. And that's not efficient. So I don't waste any time drawing until I got my sequence. And then I bang them out about a half hour a piece. Just a sketch, real quick sketch, small. So I know where the characters are, where the dialogue starts, where it's placed. This is very important because each panel has to be composed in a way that the action is totally clear, plenty of room for the words, and any kind of special art that needs to be seen has to have room, for exposition. It's very important. Each little panel is an important drawing, and I love strips where it's all dialogue and it's just 2 guys talking. It's easy. But except, well, yeah, no, it's easy. And after I draw a little rough, I send those to the Browns. And normally they just say, fine, go ahead. And then I blow it up on my computer. I blow it up to art size and take it to my studio, put it on a tracing box, know what that is, right? Light table, lights underneath. I can see through it. I take Bristol board, the nice paper, put it on there, draw a pencil, clear line, no shading, and get my pen and ink, and that's the process. After that's done, I scan it, email it to Deborah Browne, and I never see it again, except I have all these originals to keep, with some of which I've brought here, and am happy to share. I see some demand out there for it, and that makes me happy. So that's how I make the Hägars, about 3 days a week. Luckily, I don't have to answer any mail. I don't sign it, so nobody knows who I am, except you guys. And that, in a way, it's a small blessing. If I was if I was Chris Browne, I would have to be the face of Hägar. He used to have this helmet and horns that he would wear, and he would ride in the parade in South Dakota, where he lived, and he loved it. I'm a little too shy for that. In spite of what I look like up here, I am a shy person. I miss Chris. It's too bad he left us too young. And speaking of leaving us too young, I want to segue for one moment back to the underground comics days, where I started in comic books. I joined a studio whose goal was to parody Walt Disney characters. Walt, Mickey, I did some Donald. Ted Richards did Ezekiel Wolf and took off with that and did a lot of work with that character, even after Disney sued us to stop. Ted died, 3 weeks ago? And I just wanted to say he was a great cartoonist. And if you like his work, or even if you don't know it, I have some of his comic books at my table. And you can stop and take a look. I'd be happy to show you. And Denis knows Ted's work.
Absolutely. Wonderful cartoonist. But getting back to Hägar for the moment, we'll circle back to Undergrounds. So you've described the process, essentially, but how many hours a week would you say this takes you?
About 20.
20. So it's really a part-time job for you.
Mm-hmm.
So are you semi-retired, or do you do other work in the other hours?
Well, I'm semi-retired, but if I like the job, I take it. And there are some projects that I would like to do. I had an idea for a Hägar graphic novel that I would love to do. Unfortunately, when I broached the idea to King Features, they were not interested, and I was disappointed in that.
This is crazy.
Yeah.
If there are any editors or publishers in the audience, Gary wants to do a 100-page Hägar graphic novel about the Tree of Life. And the syndicate says, please, let's try to make this happen. Let's send some letters. Let's agitate, because I'd like to see it. Gary has a half a week. He's just, are you watching TV, drinking beer? You could be working on this graphic novel.
No, I could.
So we must make this happen. Do you agree? Yeah. A Hägar graphic novel.
But you must understand, Hägar is one of many, many good comic strips in the United States. And of course, you know that. I'm still astounded at how much focus is on Hägar here. It's pretty astounding. But anyway.
It does seem it is unusually popular, disproportionately popular in Germany and Scandinavia, understandably. But I would think a Hägar graphic novel would have a strong overall market, enough to attract the syndicate. So I'm going to work on this, Gary, I promise you.
And it's a big theme, the tree of life, for Pete's sake. I mean, you can do anything with that.
Absolutely. So speaking of syndicates, and I'm not a big fan of syndicates because, as those of you who are fans know, the syndicate started out owning the copyrights, owning the original art, and the artists may have gotten paid a fair percentage, but the syndicates, in my opinion, had too much control, too much power, and that continues to this day. Do you try sometimes, and maybe I shouldn't even ask this because the internet, but have you ever tried to sneak something into the strip that would get past the syndicate, a little dirty joke maybe? Do you ever try that?
Well, you know, I not only tried it, I succeeded.
You succeeded.
Because no one said stop.
So what strip is this?
No, I'm not telling you.
You're not telling?
No, you have to look and see for yourself.
Comic detectives must look for the secret little, can I say dirty joke? Is that the...
Well, not so much. I mean...
How would you describe it?
You know, dirty jokes can come back and bite you on the ass. Right?
Right.
Look what happened with Al Cap.
Well, that
Never
could be
mind.
another whole program,
Yeah.
but yes.
No, it's more like just fun. Yeah, a little joke that, if you care to look in the comic strip, you find something that doesn't quite fit. That might be one of my jokes. And I have a monogram that I put it in. It's my initials. That's a little joke that appears sometimes when it works visually. It's not a signature, but it is a signature. But it's like maybe a bauble on somebody's neck, or a sign on a tavern, something like that. You'll find my GH monogram. And that's one of my ongoing jokes.
Right. So that you learned something tonight. The syndicate, and I should say the family, don't really want Gary to sign the strip publicly, but he sneaks his symbol in. I mean, I personally think people who draw the strip should be able to sign it. Too often the syndicates say, no, only the original artist can, but if they've been gone for many years, credit should be given where credit is due, I think.
Well, I also agree, but every time I've asked for credit, it's like the Browne signature is a brand name, like Disney. We know the syndicate is not interested in messing with that. That's the way they want it.
Right. So you said you submit these roughs ahead of time, and normally there is no problem. They're automatically approved. Are there instances where the family or the syndicate has rejected something that you thought was funny, but they didn't?
Very, very seldom, and it has more to do with political correctness than a poor joke or anything like that. But very seldom. We know what flies and we know what falls. So this is not usually a problem.
Okay. I guess I am surprised because there are classic stories. I mean, Mort Walker, for example, was not allowed to draw a belly button on the general secretary when she was wearing a bikini, and for years he would draw a belly button, the syndicate would white it out. And finally he had a gag where there were navel oranges, and they were shopping, and every navel orange, of course, was drawn, and that's how he got beyond it. You have nothing comparable.
Wait a minute, did the oranges have navels or not?
Oranges were allowed to have navels. The woman was not.
I get that, but I'm not sure if I get the joke. If a navel orange has a navel, it's just an orange.
Well, I think the reason he was able to sneak it through was the editor didn't want to white out all those navels. So, but anyway, so it sounds like you've had no real problems with censorship.
No, actually, no. I cannot complain about censorship, but I've also reformed quite a bit from my underground days, and I've not pushing the envelope as hard as I used to. So maybe it's age.
Well, speaking of pushing envelopes, you and your cohorts at Air Pirates pushed them about as far as you could, didn't you? Perhaps some of the audience knows this, but Gary was part of this team that decided they could satirize Disney, X-rated Disney. Disney didn't think it was funny. And how did they get back at you?
Well, they seized our comic books, for starters, through the court system. The preliminary injunction was to cease and desist all further production of comic books and give up the ones you've already printed. It was too late for Air Pirates Comics #1. They were already distributed. Air Pirates Comics #2 were largely undistributed. They were at the printers and at the publishers, and most of those were seized. I don't know where they went or what happened, but #2 is now pretty rare. #3 was in production at the studio, and we just stopped at that point, because having our comic book studio stop when we were hoping to make a little money and there was none at all, it was a devastating blow. It destroyed Air Pirates Studio. Even though we actually knew it was going to happen, we didn't know how serious it would be to us personally. You know, our families paying the rent, all of that. It just was a difficult period. I remember at the Air Pirates Studio answering the front door. And Air Pirates Studio at that point was a big warehouse in San Francisco. It belonged to Francis Ford Coppola, the filmmaker. And it was used for storing this and that. They kept a van there that had electronic listening equipment, all kinds of stuff. There was props left over from movies. It was a good place to have a cartoon studio. But I answered the door, and there's a process server, a guy with a subpoena looking for me. Are you Gary Hallgren? No. I'm Daryl Hallgren. I'm his brother. But it didn't work, of course. You can't get away with that. And so we went to court. Our fearless leader, Dan O'Neill, was a wild man cartoonist. He had a daily comic strip distributed through the newspaper there in San Francisco. He was fired from that comic strip 3 times for being controversial. You know, the syndicate said to Dan in the beginning, when they hired him, he was very young when he was hired. He was the youngest syndicated cartoonist ever. He was only 21 years old. And they said, Dan, there's 3 rules when you do syndicated comics. No sex, no politics, no religion. So he immediately started with the religion and the politics. He was Catholic, so he never got into the sex. But he got fired 3 times, and his fans brought him back. They were so upset with the newspaper. The newspaper the newspaper hired him back. The 3rd time, no. That's when he called me and said, we're going to start this comic studio. And I said, okay, let's go. And I moved to San Francisco to do it. And where was I here?
Well, we started with Walt Disney.
Yeah. I had already been doing Disney-styled comics. It was just a natural for me. And I was happy because in the counterculture, Disney had a bad reputation. It was like a syndicate. Their attitudes about copyright were poor. Their attitudes about creators' rights were poor. They appropriated American folk tales for their own and copyrighted them as if they'd written them themselves. So it was interesting to me to study old comics and especially to do old Disney comics. We chose an early style to work in, not the modern mouse, but the old mouse, to help differentiate our parody from current Disney product, which is important because if you're going to parody something, it has to be identifiable and the same in different ways. So I thought we did a not too bad a job. I mean, we did the best we could being inexperienced young cartoonists. But when Disney stopped us from doing it, we all had to look for other work. And so we all did other underground comics for a while. But I wanted my own comic strip after that. I tried many times to develop a comic strip.
I just learned very recently that Gary collaborated on a comic strip with the comedian Roseanne Barr. Is Roseanne Barr known here? They worked on a strip together. I saw the samples. So what happened?
Roseanne got her TV show and lost interest in the comic strip. I worked on a property called Eloise, famous child lived in the hotel in New York. Million selling books in the past. I worked with Larry Hama as a writer. We had the strips sold. We were at the meeting at the syndicate. We're talking about the terms. We're about to sign sign the paper, and I would be doing this Hillary Night art, which is a little scary, but I could have done it. When somebody read in the contract that the rights were only available for 10 years, 10, and the syndicate said, wait, we can't have 20 years? And the people that had the rights, who were paying us to develop the strips, said, no, we only have it for 10 years. And the syndicate said, oh, goodbye, that's it. 20 years or nothing. And it never worked out. And that's 2 strips I didn't get. Don't get me going here. I have a lot of paper with ink on it that no one has ever seen except a few editors who said no. Denis, on the other hand, when he does something like that, he publishes it himself.
Well, there are different business models, right? But, well, if you had it all to do over again, would you poke Disney in the eye?
Well, it put me on the map, so sure.
Okay.
It was a stepping stone.
Yeah.
And it got me into the National Lampoon, which is another huge stepping stone.
Right.
Probably one of the best pieces of art I ever did was a cover for the National Lampoon, a full painting of Pinocchio, making himself a playmate out of wood so they could make splinters together. And I had a good relationship with the National Lampoon until it went under, unfortunately.
Now, wasn't there another syndicated strip you attempted and it came down to you were one of the last two?
Oh yes, that one. So my writer friend Bob Weber Jr. and I collaborated on the development of a comic strip, and we were in negotiations with King Features, famous King Features. The editor there was somebody that we knew. He was not an old fuddy-duddy. He was a friend of ours, a contemporary. You may know his name, Jay Kennedy. He died young in an accident, unfortunately. Not before we were having the meeting, but sometime after. So Bob and I were having a meeting with Jay Kennedy, and he says, I like this strip. I'd like to buy it. But we only have one slot. We're only going to buy one strip this year, and I'm looking at another strip too. I have to make up my mind which strip we're going to buy. I'll let you know in a few days. So days go by. What are we going to get this strip? Well, you can guess by now we didn't. But I'll tell you the interesting thing. Jay was correct. The strip that he bought was a worldwide success. I think it's everywhere. I mean, it's a beautiful comic strip. It has its own identity and its own sense of humor, its own look. It's a keeper. You want to know what it is? Mutts. You know Mutts?
Patrick McDonald.
Patrick
Yep.
McDonald, Mutts.
Yep. So at least you lost to somebody who was great.
That's right.
So, yeah. I have a question. Just occurred to me. I remember, I don't know what year it was, but I know I was a big fan of Prince Valiant, and at some point Hal Foster had Prince Valiant come to North America, and we all know Vikings reach the shore of North America. I don't recall any Hägar strips where his Vikings have reached North America. Have I just missed them, or has it never happened?
Oops. I know of a strip where Hägar and his crew, they're on the boat, they've come to a beach somewhere, and there's a jungle. It's the New World. And some natives come out, and they have feathered headdresses. And maybe, it could be Polynesia. I'm not sure.
Okay. So there is at least one instance you can think of.
That happens once in a while.
I think there's maybe an idea for another graphic novel.
Hägar in the New World?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, good idea.
Now, I don't know if the Germans and Scandinavians will like it, but I would like to see it. Anyway, it's just an idea. So, given that the strip has been popular for 50 years, which is rare for any strip to last that long, what do you attribute its popularity to?
Yes. Universal truth in comedy. You take a family strip where the characters reflect the national character in a way. When it seems like the gags are true, when people take the gags and put them on their refrigerators, or they say, "Did you see this one today?" That means that you're speaking some truth. And Hägar is always under the veneer of being a Viking, being a swashbuckling, he's not a barbarian, even though he might act like one. Underneath, he's a mensch, right? And that has legs. That never goes away. If you base any kind of a comedy show on that premise, if you can make it funny too, you have possibilities.
So casting is part of it.
Yeah.
You have enough foils for any gag to work.
Pretty much.
Yeah. Have you tried to introduce any new character, or is that not?
I wanted to introduce a troll.
Oh,
I gave him a troll bridge to work with, you know. But it turned out it was sort of a one gag thing, you know, a couple of gags. Unless I figure out a way for the troll to be part of the family, you know, or part of the neighborhood, it won't work. He's got to be part of the world there, not just a gatekeeper or a toll taker,
right,
or a troublemaker. All of the characters in Hägar that appear regularly have personalities that drive the gags, and that's very important. Character-driven comedy is the only kind that has longevity, I think.
Right. So there's a danger if you introduce too many new characters, you can dilute the. Because people really want, you think, the simplicity of knowing that core group?
I do think so, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we talked about how you obviously have some restrictions dealing with a syndicate because newspapers they're read by families, they're read by children, they're read by old people, so you have to have some standards. But I was sitting next to you today at the U-Comics booth, and people were asking you to do custom drawings. I saw Hägar naked, for example. So when you are doing drawings for fans, there are no restrictions. So
unless you put them on the internet, and you're not supposed to do that.
Well, true. But so for anyone who hasn't come to the booth and talked directly to Gary yet, now you know he will do almost anything you want.
It's a treat for the fans. It's a way to do something special, something interesting. I try hard to do drawings that have something funny or outrageous, or not just the same figure over and over again. That's I might as well get a rubber stamp and just do that. I don't go to a lot of conventions, and that's okay because nobody needs to see that much of me. But I'm enjoying this one very much.
When someone young asks you for advice, who they think they want to be a cartoonist, what do you think the best advice you can give a young, aspiring artist?
Read Scrooge McDuck.
Read Scrooge McDuck. Now, there is very good advice. I think you'll have a lot of people in the audience that are crossovers between Hägar and Carl Barks. Especially, I've noticed, I think in this part of the world, Carl Barks has, again, a disproportionate following. And I'm told that in part that was because the woman who translated Carl Barks was exceptional. Am I right? The name? See? Not well known by us, but it shows you how critical translation is. I don't know who translates the Hägar into German, but they must do a good job, or it wouldn't be so popular. But, so.
You have been making drawings for the last few years with no captions, just creatures that I don't even know if they're in your head. They come out your fingers when you draw.
True.
But it makes me wonder about your sanity.
Oh, well, I think it just tells you creativity is magical, and it's almost impossible to describe. I mean,
Yes, you are.
if you ask, if you had told, or someone had asked Bob Weber 20 years ago, you know, you have to come up with a gag every day, be funny every day. It's daunting. It sounds, I can't do this. Nobody can do this. And yet, day after day, he's able to do it. And I know you can do it too. So there's something in the human brain. You have to almost take on faith will come through with that gag, and the best cartoonists prove it.
And there are many, many different ways to be a cartoonist. Newspaper comics are one way. Panel cartoons, we call them gag cartoons. Not such a good way to go these days. There are not enough magazines anymore to make a living. You used to be able to do that. And that's why Westport, Connecticut was known as the cartoonist ghetto, because once a week all the gag cartoonists would take the train to New York City and submit their gag cartoons to the magazines. Then they would get together and eat lunch and get drunk. And it was fun. It was a way to live that relieved the boredom, not boredom, but the problem of working alone and maybe in the basement, with a drawing board, and trying to think up stuff that's funny. And there's no one around that's going to laugh at it. Your wife's not going to laugh at it.
And this is part of the challenge of this profession. If you're a musician, you play in front of an audience, you hear the applause, you can tell if you have made yourself popular with the audience. But a cartoonist works almost always alone.
I was going to tell you about an exception to that.
Okay.
Something I did for a while. When I was living in California with the underground comics, trying to develop newspaper strips, I needed to make a living. I discovered a way to make a living doing cartoons. I went to a resort town and did caricatures. I would draw Denis's picture sitting like this, 10 minutes, he'd give me money, take it away. And I did that for 7 summers. I made good money doing this. And it was entertainment, because every night I would have a crowd surrounding me, watching me draw these people, and they would laugh. And I would draw things that were funny, and they would laugh. And I would think of things to do with the little body and the caricature. The sitter would say, "Oh, I'm a dancer." So if I draw a dancer in a caricature, they're tripping. So just funny little things like that. And they were fighting sometimes over who was next. So that's a way of doing cartoons that is not lonesome. And I enjoyed that a lot. But I quit doing that because every street caricaturist and street portrait artist that I knew, and I knew quite a few because this all happened, this resort town in Massachusetts on the ocean had a reputation of being an artist town. And there were 40 portrait artists working in various studios, and 3 caricature artists one summer. We used to have baseball games and parties, of course. And where am I going with this?
Well, there's more than one way to kill a cat.
Yeah. Oh, yes. I was going to say, after 7 summers, I realized the future in this was either to become a sociopath or a drunk. I said, I can't be a sociopath. But traditionally, the cartoonists that lived in the Connecticut ghetto, they were funny drunks. So I said, oh, let's see if I can do that. So that's when I became an illustrator in the cartoon style. Many, many, many years, I illustrated the advent of computers for business magazines. They'd say, how can we make this dry article funny? I says, well, I'll draw you a funny computer. And I got lots of work.
And actually, I bet none of the Hägar fans or even Underground fans here know that you illustrated some very, very popular books in America by a character named Dr. Oz that were self-help medical books. They sold millions of books, and Gary was the illustrator. So he is probably, you could argue, the best seen cartoonist in America over the last 20 years or so.
So I've been told, but because it's yet another way to be a cartoonist. I mean, I'm here, there, there. If I was all in one, I would be God, but it's not. That's not how it works. Well, Denis is also like that, you know. Because of his, he likes to say he's publisher. Oh, different hat. No, I'm a cartoonist. You know, now I'm an editor. Now I'm an agent. I love that about you, Denis.
Well, we're a couple of chameleons, I guess. So how about, it's a few minutes left. Any questions from the audience over here?
I was just wondering, after 50 years, how do you still come up with gags for Hägar?
The characters come up with their own gags. I just illustrate them. That's all I can say. I mean, it's so much practice at thinking of how to set up a gag. It's almost like second nature by now. You say, after 50 years, how do I do it? After 50 years, it gets easy.
I think it's true probably in general. If you create the right characters, rich characters, then they just write themselves. I remember I published Will Eisner, and when he would finish a graphic novel, I would say, "What's next?" And he'd say, I don't know, I will let you know soon. And then he would tell me he would create characters in a setting. He didn't know where it would go. He didn't have a particular plot in mind, but he said the characters would speak to him. And I think there's a universal truth with writers and cartoonists. The core is create characters that are interesting, create conflict, create goals, good villains, and the rest falls together.
You know who my favorite villain is? On Futurama, Bender.
Ah, the robot.
Yeah.
He's amoral.
Oh, totally.
Yeah. Anybody else?
So you said that you decided to make the series Hägar, but also that you wanted to try to make a series on your own, but it didn't work. So my question is, why you decided for for Hägar? What was the reason? What did you like from this series? And if you would have your own series comic, what comic would it be?
That's a very difficult question. Because I'm a sort of not a chameleon, I'm always a cartoonist and illustrator, but I have very wide tastes. So it means I can't quite pigeonhole where I would look. I would wait for it to come to me, and I don't care where it comes from. When I see it, I will enjoy it. I will know it. You see a creative thing. It could be a graphic novel. There are 50 or 100 graphic novels in print right now. There's maybe 2 or 3 that I really like. Show me the rest. Give me a chance. I might be able to say, I'm not even sure I understood your question. But I thought you were asking what I would do if I couldn't do Hägar. Is that it?
Yes, if it's on your own to choose the series.
Come by my table. I have stories in my book the Little Space Girls. Two little girls, they live in a flying saucer. They have parents. And they circle the Earth, and they're waiting for the big bosses on the other side of the galaxy to tell them to destroy Earth. So that's the setup. But it's ordinary gag cartoons, really, in science fiction. If I had a chance to syndicate that, I would do so. But I have some comic strips in my book. Come and get it.
I think we might have time for one more. Is there anyone else? Can't see. Yes.
Earlier tonight, you told us that Hägar already visited the New World, but you left us hanging there. What's the punchline? Where did things come out of?
They say we have some food for you. It was pizza. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think that wraps it up. Thank you, everyone. I'm sure if you hang out for a while, maybe you have a chance to... Oh, there is one more I didn't see. Oh, okay.
I just wanted to know how many of those issues you had when Disney came down on you, like how many got distributed, and how long did it take for them to catch on that it was happening?
There were 2 Air Pirates titles, and it was about 6 weeks from the time the first one was published. Our goal was to do them once a month. We did the second one in 6 weeks, and about a week after that is when they filed for the lawsuit, and they actually had to be, someone had to take them comic books and say, come here, look, see this? Look what's going on. And guess who did that? A friend of ours. Yeah. No. We sent him to do so. We wanted Disney to do that. He jumped the gun. He did it a little too soon. There's a third comic book that was not part of the lawsuit. After they stopped Air Pirates 1 and 2, I did a book called The Tortoise and the Hare, where I continued one of the stories from Air Pirates and reprinted the first part and finished the second part. No one knows about this comic book. It's not famous. It wasn't sued. But once again, come by my table. I'll show you.
Okay. Well, thank you for coming tonight. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you, Dennis. Now, can we get some more Teggins here?
I hope so.
Definitely, there's more.
Wow.
Ich sage herzlichen Dank für die Aufmerksamkeit, herzlichen Dank für die tollen Fragen, and many thanks to you guys. Really, it was fast ride through comics history, so thank you. Thanks for standing much longer with us. We have some beers, we have some comic books to sign. Yeah, enjoy the evening. Maybe have a look on the exhibition. We have a good catalog on the exhibition as well. So, see you guys.